They taught you to be fair. They never warned you what fairness costs in a world that rewards deception. And by the time you realize it, the damage is already done. This chapter is not about anger or revenge. It is about awareness, because the most dangerous battles in life are not announced. They begin quietly, while you still believe everyone is playing by the same rules. Most people move through life assuming there is a shared code. That effort is noticed, that honesty is protected, that good intentions are returned with good intentions. This belief feels safe. It feels clean. It feels right. And that is exactly why it is exploited. You don't lose to dirty players because they are smarter than you. You lose because you didn't know you were in a different game. While you were focused on doing the right thing, someone else was focused on winning. While you were being transparent, they were being strategic. While you were thinking about truth, they were thinking about timing. This is the moment most people remember too late. The moment they say, "I didn't see it coming," but the signs were always there. They just didn't look like danger. The person who plays dirty rarely looks like an enemy. They look friendly. They listen closely. They agree often. They ask questions that feel supportive but collect information. They smile while measuring your limits. They watch how you react under pressure, not to help you, but to map you. And you mistake this attention for respect. Machiavelli understood something uncomfortable about human nature. People do not follow what is right. They follow what feels convincing. Truth does not win by itself. It needs protection. Most damage does not come from open attack. It comes from quiet influence. A rumor shared out of concern. A doubt framed as curiosity. A story told without names, but with clear targets. And suddenly, you are defending yourself against things you never said. Explaining actions you never questioned before. Feeling pressure without knowing where it came from. This is how the game begins. Not with violence, but with confusion. History repeats this pattern over and over. Kings were not removed by armies first. They were removed by whispers. Trust was weakened. Loyalty was questioned. And by the time the sword appeared, the outcome was already decided. The same pattern plays out in offices, friendships, families, and relationships. Only the scale changes. You assume honesty will protect you, but honesty without awareness is exposure. You assume fairness will save you, but fairness without boundaries is permission. Here is the first awakening. Not everyone wants peace. Some people want advantage. And they will let you destroy yourself while they stay clean. They rely on your reactions. Your need to be understood. Your urge to correct the record. Every explanation you give becomes material. Every emotional response becomes evidence. Every defense becomes suspicion. You think you are clearing your name. They know you are feeding the fire. Machiavelli warned that people judge with their eyes before their hands. What they see matters more than what is true. And when someone controls the story, they control perception. When they control perception, they control outcomes. This is why good people often lose early. They think being right is enough. They think silence is guilt, and speaking is safety. But silence can be strength, and speaking can be surrender. The awakening is painful because it breaks an illusion. The illusion that the world is fair by default. The illusion that effort guarantees protection. It does not. Fairness is not a shield. It is a choice. And sometimes a weakness. This does not mean you abandon your values. It means you stop assuming others share them. You begin to watch instead of react. You begin to notice patterns instead of intentions. You begin to understand that some people do not want truth. They want control. And once you see this, something changes. You stop bleeding without knowing why. You stop trusting without observation. You stop walking blind into traps disguised as conversations. This is not paranoia. This is clarity. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming awake. Because you cannot defeat a dirty player while pretending the ground is clean. The first step is not action. It is awareness. You don't need to strike back. You need to see clearly. Once you recognize the game, you regain your footing. And the man who sees the board is no longer easy to move. This chapter is the awakening. The moment you realize fairness is not protection in a world where deception is rewarded. Dirty players do not attack openly. They influence quietly while you remain unaware. Truth alone does not win. Perception does. Once you see the game for what it is, you stop losing unknowingly and begin preparing with intention. Once you see the game, the next stage is harder, because now you have to look at the players. And this is where most people hesitate, not because they don't understand, but because what they understand makes them uncomfortable. Dirty players do not look like villains. They do not shout. They do not threaten. They rarely break rules in ways you can point to. They operate in the gray. They understand something early in life. Most people are emotional before they are logical, and emotions are easier to steer than facts. So they learn to pull strings instead of punches. A dirty player studies reactions. They notice who needs approval, who explains too much, who feels guilty for setting boundaries. They don't rush. They wait. They say small things. Just enough to test, just enough to watch your face change, just enough to see where the cracks are. And once they find a weakness, they don't attack it directly. They apply pressure slowly. They frame doubt as concern. They disguise control as advice. They turn questions into weapons. Are you sure that's the right move? I just want to make sure you're okay. I heard something, but I didn't believe it. Nothing here sounds aggressive. That's the point. Dirty players know that open aggression wakes people up, but confusion puts them to sleep. They rely on one thing above all else: your reaction. If you get angry, you look unstable. If you defend yourself, you look guilty. If you stay silent without strategy, they speak for you. They don't need to lie loudly. They let others finish the story. This is why arguing with them feels useless, because they are not trying to convince you. They are shaping how others see you. Machiavelli warned that power is not held by those who are right, but by those who are believed. Dirty players understand this deeply. They invest in perception. They build alliances quietly. They position themselves as reasonable, calm, and helpful. And when the moment comes, you are already surrounded by doubt. You may feel like you are losing your mind. Like something is wrong, but you can't prove it. Like every move you make is being watched and twisted. That feeling is not weakness. It is awareness arriving late. Dirty players thrive in systems where people assume good intent. They hide behind politeness, behind rules, behind your fear of being seen as difficult. They count on you wanting peace more than clarity. This is why they provoke emotional responses. A sharp comment, a public challenge, a subtle insult. They want you to react, because reactions are loud, and loud looks messy. Meanwhile, they stay calm, measured, controlled, and control is always mistaken for truth. History shows this pattern clearly. The most effective takeovers did not start with force. They started with influence. Public opinion shifted first. Trust eroded next. And by the time resistance formed, it was already isolated. The same thing happens in small lives, in workspaces, in families, in relationships. One person quietly changes the tone, another becomes the problem, and everyone else follows the mood in the room. Here is the darker truth. Dirty players often believe they are justified. They see life as competition. They see people as pieces. They believe if they don't take advantage, someone else will. So they don't feel shame. They feel clever. They don't see manipulation as wrong. They see it as skill. And that makes them dangerous, because they are not emotional about it. You are. They expect you to play fair. They rely on it. Your honesty becomes predictability. Your openness becomes access. Your patience becomes delay. And delay is where they work. This is the descent. The moment you realize not everyone wants mutual respect. Some people want leverage. And once you understand this, you stop taking things personally. You stop seeing insults. You start seeing strategies. You notice patterns instead of words, timing instead of tone, audience instead of argument. You realize the goal was never to hurt your feelings. It was to shape your position. This awareness is heavy because it changes how you see people. You may feel colder, more distant, less trusting. But this is not corruption. It is adaptation. You cannot survive among predators while pretending you are among friends. Understanding dirty players does not mean becoming one. It means no longer being naive. It means you stop feeding fires with emotion. You stop explaining yourself to those who benefit from misunderstanding you. You stop fighting battles you were designed to lose. You begin to watch. And watching is power. The descent is uncomfortable because it strips away innocence. But innocence without awareness is not virtue. It is exposure. Once you understand how dirty players move, their tactics lose mystery. They become predictable. And when something becomes predictable, it becomes manageable. This is not darkness. It is clarity earned through pain. You are not paranoid for noticing manipulation. You are late for noticing it. Dirty players rely on emotion, confusion, and your need to be understood. They shape perception quietly while provoking reactions from others. Once you understand how they operate, you stop reacting emotionally and begin seeing patterns instead of insults. After awareness comes understanding, and after understanding comes a choice. This is where most people fail. They see how dirty players operate, and they react with anger. They want revenge. They want to expose. They want to strike back using the same tricks. That impulse is natural. And it is dangerous. Because the final stage is not about fighting harder. It is about becoming untouchable. True mastery does not make you louder. It makes you quieter. Dirty players survive on reaction. They need your emotion, your rush to defend yourself, your need to be seen as right. So the first rule of mastery is control. You stop explaining yourself to people who already decided who you are. You stop correcting every lie. You stop reacting on their timeline. Silence becomes a weapon. Not weak silence, not fearful silence, but deliberate silence. Because when you don't react, something strange happens. The manipulator loses direction. Their pressure has nowhere to land. Their story lacks fuel. They start to expose themselves. The second rule is consistency. Dirty players thrive on chaos. They poke until you change behavior, until you break pattern, until you contradict yourself. So you don't give them that. You become steady, calm in tone, clear in action. You don't overshare. You don't vent publicly. You don't let moods guide decisions. You understand something most people never do. Unpredictable emotion is easy to control. Predictable discipline is not. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He believed restraint was more powerful than force, that a man who governs himself cannot be easily governed by others. The third rule is observation. You stop assuming intent. You start tracking behavior. Not what they say once, but what they repeat. Not how they act in public, but what they do in private. Not how they treat you, but how they treat those beneath them. You don't confront too early. You don't accuse without leverage. You let patterns form. You let evidence gather. Because exposure without timing is suicide. Dirty players rely on urgency. They push you to act fast, to respond emotionally, to make mistakes in public. You deny them that speed. You move slowly. You move quietly. And when you move once. The fourth rule is boundaries. This is where many people feel guilt. They confuse boundaries with cruelty, distance with hatred. But mastery requires separation. You limit access. You reduce information flow. You stop giving people tools to use against you. Not everyone deserves to know your plans. Not everyone deserves your vulnerability. Not everyone deserves your trust. Trust is earned through consistency, not words. And here is the turning point most people miss. You don't defeat dirty players by exposing them. You defeat them by outgrowing them. When you stop reacting, they lose relevance. When you stop engaging, they lose control. When you stop needing validation, they lose leverage. They may still talk, but their words no longer land, because you are no longer standing where they aim. This is mastery, not dominance, not cruelty, not manipulation, but self-command. You no longer play the same game. You don't need to win every argument. You don't need to correct every false story. You choose your battles, and because of that, you rarely fight. History shows this clearly. The strongest leaders were not the most aggressive. They were the most controlled. They waited. They watched. They moved only when the outcome was already decided. In daily life, mastery looks quiet. It looks like patience under pressure, like calm during provocation, like walking away without explaining yourself. It looks like discipline when chaos is offered. And this is the final truth. Dirty players are trapped by their own tactics. They must keep manipulating. They must keep controlling. They must keep stirring conflict. You don't. Freedom is your advantage. When you understand the game, the players, and yourself, something shifts. You stop feeling hunted. You stop feeling angry. You stop feeling the need to prove anything. You are no longer trying to win against them. You are building beyond them, and that is why they lose. Not because you fought dirty, but because you stopped being reachable. Mastery is not loud. It does not announce itself. It is felt in calm moments where chaos once lived. When you control yourself, others lose control over you. You don't need to become ruthless to survive. You only need to become clear. Mastery is not corruption. It is clarity. It comes from silence, discipline, boundaries, and self-control. When you see the game, understand the players, and govern your own reactions, dirty tactics lose power. You no longer need to fight dirty. By becoming unreachable, you have already won.